If you have been an observer of American politics for any short amount of time, you probably have heard of the phrase that we must save our democracy, or that we must fight this person, in this case, Trump, to save our democracy. And many people have criticized this phrase, and they have criticized the use of the word democracy in the American context for a reason that is well known, that is oftentimes cited, for it being a category error. In other words, for it ascribing a category to America and a condition to America that does not reflect what we are. Everyone, or many people know who understand America, that we are not a democracy. We are instead a republic. But what if I told you there is a more fundamental, a less often cited, and a more precise reason why you should reject the phrase that we have to save our democracy, and that you should reject anyone who tries to frame America itself as a democracy? And what if I told you that more precise and concise argument was rooted not in talking points, but instead in philosophy and strong, good old American political values? Before I get into all of that, let me just say this. Hello, my friends. I am Christian Watson. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you being here. If you appreciate political and social commentary with a philosophical bent, which is so direly needed in our current age of intellectual dryness and mediocrity, then I must implore you, please subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, comment, even if you disagree with me. In fact, especially if you do. Because disagreement is simply a process of refining the mind and ensuring that you are in relationship with the truth and not merely enslaved and shackled to your own biases and your own passions, merely them. So I encourage all of you to please like, share, subscribe, do whatever you can. Now, onto the video. So as I mentioned, one of the more common arguments as to why the phrase save our democracy, or the attempt to phrase America as democracy, is rejected is because it is simply what we call in philosophy a category error. That is, when you ascribe a quality that belongs to a different category to something that does not belong to. For example, if you were to call a dog a man, that is a category error because a dog is not a man. So if you were to try to do that, that would be called a category error. If you were to try to call a cat a car, that's a category error because cats are not cars. So when people try to call America a democracy, it's a category error because America is functionally not a democracy. And the canons of writing and the literature of the early founding fathers and of also early America actually established this truth quite well, whether it be the Federalist Papers, which people don't realize are just one section of 1/10 of a part of the American political mind. They're not even the entire, because there are also the anti-federalists like Patrick Henry and those people who had a very fiery passion for freedom and liberty and community and virtue within their hearts. Whether it be the Federalist Papers, whether it be the independent writings of different founding fathers, whether it be the musings of Thomas Jefferson, or whether it simply be the roots of American political theory, going back to John Locke, going back to people who you don't know, like Samuel Pufendorf, going back to people you don't know, like Hugo Grotius, or Francisco Suarez, or Wolfe, or Christian Thomasius. These people who helped build the intellectual foundations of our country, all of whom were skeptical of a democratic political order. Regardless of what it is evident to anyone that looks at history, that looks at America, that looks at the condition of our nation, that we are not a democracy. So, let's move beyond that argument, and I'll revisit it in a second because there'll be people that raise objections to it, but I'll revisit it in a second. The more fundamental reason why the phrase save our democracy, which you've seen everywhere, which you have seen politicians say, you may have even seen the media say it, you may have even seen organizations like the Democratic National Committee post on their social media that very phrase. You may have heard President Joe Biden actually explicitly use this invocation of a democratic political order to attack his political opponents. You may have heard leftist organizations say, you may have heard all kinds of people, you may have heard professors say it, activists. This is the go-to phrase for the classes on the political left that seek to run their project through America and dramatically transform our nation into something that it's not. And it's significant because when you hear people saying the same thing over and over and over and over again, and you hear the argument that they say not even vary in between the tenor of when they say it, you know something is amiss.
Extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is 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 extremely dangerous to our democracy.
The true objection to the phrase that we have to save our democracy, or the idea that America is a democracy, is found by looking at the way that phrase is stated. The true objection to saying America is a democracy, or saying we have to save our democracy in the context of America, is that it is an error of values. It is a false value proposition. So let me explain this for you so you guys can all understand it. The term our democracy implies collective ownership. And to save our democracy implies collective responsibility towards some value. Because in this sentence, democracy is being held as the highest value. This will become very important in a moment. Stay with me. And so this is actually where the problem with this phrase lies. Democracy, in the minds of people that view America as a democracy, and in the minds of people who use the phrase our democracy, and especially in the minds of people who say we have to save our democracy, democracy has taken the place as the highest political value in this argument. It has usurped every other political value that is endemic, integral to the American system of politics and the American way of life. And it has overthrown them and replaced them all with this abstract notion of democracy. See, America was not founded with just one value in mind. We were not founded with just one idea in mind. Many people will say America is all about freedom. Well, it's a big part of America's DNA to be concerned with freedom, but that's not the only value. If it was the only value, you would have a system where chaos reigns and there's no other moderating principles. America was concerned with the freedom of people, liberty, i.e. the ability to act with your capacity, your will, without unjust inhibition, i.e. freedom, in the context of other political values such as justice, equality, reason, consent, fairness, so on and so forth. The problem becomes this. All of those principles make up what is called classical republicanism, which is actually the system that America runs off of. It was inspired by the Roman Republic, and it was refined through the ages of the Enlightenment and through a bunch of other political theory added by other people like the folks I mentioned to you. But when it is presupposed that democracy is the highest value, all those other values, justice, equality, fairness, consent, liberty, they become displaced and they become held in a more inferior light than democracy. Do you guys see what's actually going on here? Hence, the phrase, save our democracy, imposes a value hierarchy that is inimical, opposed to the core ethos of the classically Republican nation we know as America. Therefore, when people say we have to save our democracy, or when people say that America is a democracy, they are being anti-American by definition because they are usurping every value that makes America a unique nation, and they are displacing it with a relic from the old ancient world called democracy, which inevitably lapses into tyranny. It inevitably lapses into a form of unintelligible mob rule. That is what's happening. And for those of you who say you're being a pedant, Christian Watson, no, I'm being someone that understands the value of truth and substance over rhetoric and emotion, and making sure you have a sound conception of what is happening in politics. But unfortunately, our politics is governed by the passions. Now, the ancient Greeks, who actually showed just why democracy in its pure form is so terrible, actually had some wisdom on this. They called it continence, the idea that your passions need to be suppressed by your reason and by other appetites so that you do not become a tyrannical man. It was Socrates, that said it in the Republic. I believe it was chapter 7, chapter 8 of the Republic, the Bloom edition, that if you have a soul overrun with passion, you can't function in society and you become a tyranny to yourself and society. Well, the Greeks are right about that. Because right now, the only way for the left and the Democratic Party's ideology of America to make sense is if we become overrun by our passions and we don't think critically about what they are saying to us in a logical and rational manner. Democracy is not simply a feel-good word. It is a threat, funnily enough, to the American understanding of politics. And most importantly, it is a threat to the New World conception of political order. What do I mean? I'll close on this. The New World was not just a geographical designation for the territories that had not yet been explored, or that had been explored only barely by Hernando de Soto or Christopher Columbus. Many people think of the New World in terms of geography. You should all think of the New World in terms of philosophy, in terms of civilizational transference. Because with the New World came the death of the Old World notion of political order, that man was simply a slave to status, to familial bloodline, to the king, to the ruler, to the caste system, or the feudal system. And it liberated man from that and said, no, man is not a slave to these systems. Man is instead a spiritual entity that possesses moral qualities that we call right, that we can understand through natural law, which is objective truth, that is accessible to everyone by virtue of their humanity. Therefore, being a human in and of itself is a politically, socially, and morally significant designation that does not involve you having to get permission from authority to matter, exist, or survive. In America, embodied the spiritual notion of man, which then from that flowed the contractual view of society, that consent and contract are very important, not the only important, but they are very important principles in maintaining a civil and free society. And it embodied that and created, which is perhaps the greatest paragon to human greatness known to the world, called America. We're losing it, unfortunately, but we can fight back if we rediscover these truths. That's the New World. But democracy says there is validity in population. There is validity in the masses. There is validity in status. And there used to be, and some of you should research this, there used to be this idea that democracy was actually the voice of God, that God would express himself through the people. But this is a numerical fallacy. Democracy is a numerical fallacy because the amount of people that support something says nothing about the morality of a thing unless we presume the morality of a thing is dependent on perspective. So in that worldview, democracy is only the second problem you have. The first problem you have is moral relativism, which has done a big number on our nation. So in closing, my friends, democracy is not merely a category error. It is an error of values and a rejection of everything that makes America what it is in its intellectual, political, and social DNA. And for that reason, I submit to you that we ought to reject the cries to save our democracy and instead save our republic from the ignorance of the masses who are then preyed upon by institutions, who are then awarded by politicians, who then use that power that they have to harm our country. We ought to reject that and reject those people who seek to re-establish an America that never existed and, in my opinion, never should exist unless we wish to lose our birthright as Americans in this nation. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe. Do whatever you can to get this message out there. This is fiery, this is good, this is intense, this is intellectual. We need this in our country. If you want to support me, donate to me, it's in the comment section down below. My friends, study history, study philosophy, remain morally convicted, and please stay pensive. I beg of you, stay pensive. Bye, guys.